Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're not diving into grand wars or epic love stories that shake the heavens. No, tonight we're going small. We're taking a side path, away from the marble halls of Olympus and the roaring arenas. We're heading to a quiet, sun-baked stretch of shoreline somewhere in the Aegean, where the water is so clear it hurts to look at, and the only sound is the lazy push and pull of the waves on the pebbles. It's the kind of place where time doesn't just slow down, it forgets to wind its clock entirely. And you're there. You're not a hero. You're not even a notable side character in someone else's ballad. You're just you, a person trying to get by in a world where the weather is literally at the whim of a moody sky god with a lightning bolt fixation. You're probably wearing a simple chiton that's seen better days, and the idea of sunscreen is a cruel joke. Trust me, the historical alternatives involve things like crocodile dung and olive clay, and you would absolutely not survive the smell or the social embarrassment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment below telling me where in the world and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking along that shore, the cool water licking at your ankles. The air is thick with the smell of salt and dry time. Life here, in the shadow of the gods, is a precarious thing. One minute you're enjoying a decent fig. The next, Zeus is having a domestic dispute with Hera, and suddenly your entire olive grove is a smoldering crater because he missed a throw. It's stressful. You have to be paranoid about everything. Did you make the right sacrifice? Was the lamb plump enough? Did you accidentally look too handsome and attract Aphrodite's fickle attention, dooming you to a love life more convoluted than a minotaur's maze? It's exhausting. You feel like a background extra in a blockbuster movie where the main actors have terrible tempers and reality-altering powers. And that's the common, well-known part of Greek myth life. The constant, low-grade anxiety of divine whim. Everyone knows that. Here's the lesser-known fact. Most people actually just tried to ignore them. There were entire philosophical schools springing up, like the Epicureans, who basically advised, live quietly, avoid politics and drama, and the gods probably aren't micromanaging your lunch anyway. It was a coping mechanism. Historians still debate how much the average Greek farmer really bought into the grandiose Homeric versions of the gods versus just seeing them as unpredictable forces of nature, like a particularly sentient and vindictive hurricane. You're pondering this, toes digging into the wet sand, when you see it. Not far off, where the rocky part of the coast juts out, there's a tiny, sheltered cove. And in that cove, there's a rudimentary but sturdy little hut made of woven reeds and driftwood. Smoke curls from a small, well-contained fire. And there's a man, an old man to be precise. His back is to you, and he's bent over something, working with a slow, rhythmic patience that seems utterly alien to your frazzled existence. He's not praying. He's not looking nervously at the sky. He's just carving a piece of wood. This is Chelin. And his very existence in this quiet corner feels like a secret. A peaceful, unhurried secret in a world that's always running from or towards something divine. You feel your own breathing start to sync with the waves, and you take a few quiet steps closer, curious about this pocket of calm. You take slow steps across the gravel, the crunching sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. The hut comes into clearer view. Not ramshackle, but tidy and intentional. A tiny, well-tended garden with herb rows and a climbing vine hugs its side. No altar, no small deity statues. The man, Chelin, is still intent on his task. You can hear the steady, dry, soft sound of wood being carved. He wears a simple cloak of coarse cloth, the color of dirt, nearly blending with a rock he sits on. His hair is a neat silver cap, his face carved with deep lines, but not lines of worry, lines of long focus on a single thing. He looks like a stone worn smooth by time, not shattered by it. You stop at a polite distance, not wanting to intrude, but the old man looks up without turning. Come. His voice is low, raspy like wind through dry reeds. This spot belongs to no one, not even to them. He turns. His eyes are clear, light gray, as still as the water in the cove on a windless day. He doesn't ask who you are or why you're here. He simply nods toward another flat rock nearby, an invitation. On it sit an earthen water jug and two crude wooden cups. You sit, the coolness of the stone seeping through your clothes. He sets down the object he's carving, a wooden sphere, slightly larger than a fist, its surface not yet smooth. He pours you water. It tastes cool, slightly sweet, with a hint of grass. People don't usually find this place, Chelin says, looking out to sea. They're busy running to the temples in the city, offering bigger and bigger gifts to be noticed, or running from the wrath of some god they've accidentally slighted. He offers a slight smile, not mocking, just present. They're like ants scattering under the gaze of a curious child. The faster they run, the more likely they are to be seen, and the more likely a finger comes down just to see what happens. Here's a lesser-known fact. For many common people, worship was often more transactional and risk-averse than purely devotional. They cared less about the god's romantic escapades and more about which god oversaw the harvest, which caused earthquakes, and how to keep them placated. Historians still debate whether this was a form of pragmatic religion or simply human instinct for survival in the face of the unexplainable. Chelin takes a sip of water. He says, find it more interesting to sit still and watch the child. Learn what it likes, what it dislikes, when it grows tired and goes to sleep. Then I move, very slowly, to where I want to be beneath its notice. He points to the wooden sphere. Like this. It is nothing special, but it will serve its purpose in its own time. No fanfare, no grand promises. It just is. You look at the wooden object, then at the endless coastline, and feel a strange calm seep into your mind, like the tide receding gently. Perhaps you think you found the thing you didn't even know you were looking for, an exit from the race. Chelin's philosophy soaks into you, slowly, like water into parched sand. He doesn't preach or make grand declarations. He simply lives his way, and as you quietly observe day by day, you begin to understand. Slow is sure, he'd say, not as a slogan, but as an observation of reality, like saying water is wet. You help him in the garden, learning to distinguish weed from seedling without hurriedly pulling. You sit with him mending the hut's roof, each reed tied down with care and strength. Every task has its own rhythm, a steady patience. It's the absolute opposite of the world outside, where every story is about speed. Achilles the swiftest runner, Hermes the flash-footed messenger. Even prophecies are a race to outrun fate. Chelin points to an old sea turtle crawling up the distant sand, its movement seeming almost frozen compared to the breaking waves. People laugh at its slowness, he says, but it has outlived many quicker things. It doesn't waste energy. It moves when it must and stops when it must. It carries its house on its back, so it never has to rush for shelter when the storm comes. He turns to you, his gray eyes bright. The gods? They have to prove. Zeus must prove his strength with storms. Poseidon must prove his power with tidal waves. Apollo must prove his skill with singing contests. They're like children shouting, "Look at me, look at me." And then they're surprised when someone is not looking. You realize this is a deeply subversive, almost blasphemous viewpoint, delivered so gently it sounds obvious. A weird, little-known fact. In some very old, localized folklore, deities were sometimes described not as omnipotent beings, but as powerful yet flawed entities who could even be tricked or outmaneuvered by mortal cleverness. Fables of gods being bested by the wisdom of humans or weaker creatures are more common than we think, perhaps an ancient way for people to reclaim a sliver of agency in a chaotic universe. Historians still debate whether such tales are remnants of an older, more grounded belief system where divinities were more approachable and predictable, or simply wishful thinking by ordinary people. Chelon seems an embodiment of that tradition. He doesn't worship display. He values self-containment, quiet understanding, and what he calls true possession. If you cannot carry it with you, or it cannot shelter you when you most need it, he asks, tapping the hut wall, is it truly yours, or are you just borrowing it until someone stronger comes to take it? Then one day the sky is oddly still. Not a cloud wisp, not a breath of wind. The quiet becomes heavy, as if nature is holding its breath. Chelon stops his work, lifts his head, his gaze fixed on the empty space above the horizon. The slight smile is gone, replaced by a look of serious, watchful calm. It's coming, he says, no surprise in his voice, just a statement. The child's curiosity. It has heard a whisper about an ant that does not run. A cold draft snakes through the warm cove, and you feel an overwhelming, colossal presence turning its attention your way, as if the sky itself is leaning down to look. You understand now. The peace is over. The unwanted attention of Olympus has finally found the little island. The air doesn't just cool. It thickens, charged with a static that raises the hair on your arms. It's the feeling before a lightning strike, stretched out and magnified 1,000-fold. The gentle hum of the cove is swallowed by a profound, waiting silence. Chelon doesn't flinch. He slowly sets his carving tools in a neat row beside the wooden sphere, a gesture of meticulous order amid the gathering chaos. He looks at you, and for the first time, you see something other than calm in his eyes, a sharp, calculating focus. Remember the turtle, he says, his voice barely above a whisper, yet cutting through the heavy air. Not its shell, but its mind. It sees the shadow of the seabird and knows. To move now is to be seen. To be still is to be a stone. Then the light changes. It doesn't darken. It sharpens as if every pebble, every ripple of water, is suddenly lit from within by a cold, white sun. And he is there, not arriving in a chariot of fire or with a thunderclap. That would be too crude, too much effort for a casual visit. Zeus simply manifests, seated upon a low, smooth boulder that wasn't there a moment ago. He looks reasonable, a powerful, bearded man in the prime of life, wrapped in a simple white himation, his eyes the color of a stormy sky. He radiates an aura of casual, unquestionable authority, the kind that makes you want to bow just to relieve the pressure of it. But it's a trap. You feel it in your bones. This is the reasonable face of absolute power, and it's more terrifying than any roaring visage. He surveys the cove, the hut, the garden, with an expression of mild, patronizing interest, like a grown-up examining a child's mud pie. His gaze slides over you, making you feel instantly insignificant and hypervisible before settling on Chelon. Chelon, the god's voice is deep, melodious, and it vibrates in your teeth. The one who does not run, the one who does not ask. I hear whispers of a mortal who thinks he can observe the heavens without offering tribute. A curious notion. This is the universally known part. Zeus, king of the gods, is prone to bouts of jealousy, pride, and a need to assert dominance, especially over clever mortals who might challenge the divine order. Prometheus learned this the hard way. What follows is almost a script. Chelon merely bows his head, not deeply, just a slight inclination. The heavens observe themselves, Lord. I merely exist beneath them. Zeus smiles, a flash of perfect, disarming teeth. To exist is to participate. To be noticed is to be challenged. You have been noticed, old man. Your quiet insists upon itself. It is a silent shout in my halls, and I find I dislike silent shouts. He leans forward, the air crackling. So, let us have a contest. A simple thing, to settle this tension. A weird, lesser-known truth. Challenges and contests between gods and mortals weren't always epic battles. Sometimes they were bizarre, asymmetrical games of wit or skill, often rigged from the start. It was a way for a god to demonstrate superiority without outright obliteration, a more refined, and for them, entertaining form of cruelty. The ancient Greeks recorded stories of gods challenging mortals to weaving contests, drinking games, and riddle solving, always stacking the deck. Chelon doesn't refuse. He doesn't protest. He looks up, meeting the god's stormy eyes. "What is the contest, Lord?" Zeus stands, and he seems to fill the entire sky. "A test of might, of true, projective force. I will throw something of mine. You will throw something of yours. Whose object flies farther wins." He says it as if it's the fairest, most obvious game in the world. A grin plays on his lips. If you win, your island remains in its peaceful obscurity. Your silence is granted. If I win, he lets the sentence hang, the threat as palpable as the ozone scent now filling the air. The implication is clear. Loss means annihilation, or worse, transformation into a cautionary tale. Historians still debate the psychological underpinnings of such myths. Was it a narrative device to explore the sheer, terrifying arbitrariness of power, or a way to process the very real, very random violence of nature? A lightning bolt from a clear blue sky? Chelon looks from Zeus to his simple wooden sphere, then out to the vast, empty horizon. He doesn't look afraid. He looks like he's solving a problem. "I accept," he says, his voice still quiet, but now it carries a different weight. But a throw must be prepared for. Even a humble object deserves a moment of focus. "Grant me until tomorrow's sunrise to prepare my possession." Zeus laughs, a sound like distant, rolling thunder. "A day? You think to craft a weapon in a day? Grant me." He spreads his hands, the epitome of magnanimous power. "Take your day, old turtle. I enjoy a spectacle with a proper build-up." And with that, the pressure lifts slightly. The light returns to normal. The boulder is empty. But the feeling of being watched, of being a bug under a magnifying glass waiting for the sun to be angled just so, remains. Chelon lets out a long, slow breath and turns to you. "Now," he says, picking up his carving knife again, his movements returning to that familiar, unhurried rhythm. "We must think, not about throwing far, but about what it truly means to own something." The rest of that day passes in a surreal bubble of normalcy. Chelon doesn't rush. He doesn't start frantically building a giant catapult or praying for divine intervention. He simply returns to his workbench, picks up the wooden sphere, and continues to carve. The rhythm of his knife against the grain is the same steady shush-shush as before. The only difference is the slight furrow of concentration between his brows. You sit nearby, the silence between you now charged with unspoken questions. Finally, you can't hold it in. "A throwing contest? With Zeus?" You whisper, the name itself feeling dangerous to utter. "He'll throw a mountain, or a comet. How can you possibly?" Chelon doesn't look up. The terms were clear, something of mine. He will throw something he believes is his. I will throw something I know is mine. The contest is not about distance. It is about definition. He blows with dust from the sphere, revealing a smoother surface. It's not perfectly round. It's slightly asymmetrical, organic, like a river stone worn by water. Everyone knows Zeus claims the sky, the lightning, the very air of authority. That is the popular, obvious truth. He holds the sphere up, squinting at it. The less-known truth is that claiming is not owning. A king may claim a kingdom, but does he own every blade of grass, every breath of every subject, or does he just command the idea of it? He puts the sphere down and begins working on something else. A simple, shallow dish of baked clay, about the size of a large bowl. He mixes a paste of ash and oil, rubbing it into the clay, darkening it. His movements are deliberate, almost ritualistic. You watch, confused. This isn't a javelin or a discus. It's a bowl and a ball. What are you making? You ask. A reminder, he says cryptically, in a container. As the sun begins to set, painting the cove in oranges and purples, Chelon finally stops. He places the dark clay bowl on the flat rock and sets the wooden sphere inside it. It fits snugly like an egg in a nest. He nods, satisfied. There, now they are together, a thing in the space it occupies. That night, sleep is impossible. You lie on your simple pallet in the hut, staring at the thatched roof, listening to the now ominous silence of the night. Every rustle of a creature, every sigh of the waves, feels like a prelude to doom. Your mind races with images of Zeus hurling a thunderbolt so mighty it circles the world, or tearing a star from the firmament and pitching it into the cosmic void. And Chelon, throwing a wooden ball. The absurdity is terrifying. A well-known trope in these myths is the hubris of mortals who think they can outmatch the gods. They are inevitably crushed, transformed into spiders, chained to rocks, or doomed to endlessly futile tasks. Icarus, Arachne, Sisyphus, the list is a litany of divine punishment for audacity. But Chelon doesn't seem audacious. He seems certain. A weird, little-known fact. In some fragmentary texts and local cults, there were stories of victories against gods that weren't victories of force, but of logic. A mortal would satisfy the literal terms of a god's challenge in a way the god hadn't anticipated, forcing a grudging acknowledgement. These weren't stories of triumph, but of survival through semantic cleverness, a way to cheat an unwinnable system. Historians still debate if these represent an early form of philosophical thought breaking free from mythic literalism, or just very savvy folk tales for the powerless. Just before dawn, Chelon stirs. He rises, takes the bowl with the sphere, and walks down to the water's edge. You follow. The world is hushed, caught in that pale, gray light where everything seems to hold its breath. He doesn't speak. He simply stands there, looking at his reflection in the still water, then at the sphere in its bowl, as if memorizing their relationship. Then he turns, picks up the sphere, and leaves the bowl on the sand. He walks back to the center of the cove, the sphere looking small and ridiculous in his weathered hand. He places it on the ground by his feet. Remember, he says to you, not looking away from the eastern horizon where the first sliver of sun is about to breach. The throw is not the important part. The claim is. Watch the claim. The air cracks, not with sound, but with pressure, as if the sky is a giant sheet of ice beginning to fracture. Light floods the cove, not from the rising sun, but from above. Zeus is back. This time, he is not pretending at simplicity. He is clad in shimmering, impossibly bright cloth, his hair and beard crackling with subtle energy. He holds no weapon. He is the weapon. His smile is gone, replaced by a look of serene, terrifying readiness. The sun marks the day. Zeus's voice booms, no longer melodious, but pure, reverberating power. Are you prepared, Chelon? Is your possession ready? Chelon looks down at the wooden sphere at his feet, then back at the god. He gives a single, slow nod. It is. And yours, Lord? Zeus throws his head back and laughs, and the sound shakes the ground beneath you. Mine is eternal. Mine is limitless. Behold. He raises his arm, and the world goes white. It's not just light. It's the essence of violence given pure, radiant form. Zeus doesn't draw a lightning bolt from the sky. He focuses the sky itself. From the endless blue, from the scattered clouds on the horizon, from the very charge in the air around you. Energy coalesces into a searing, twisting line of white-hot fury in his grasp. It's not a tool. It's an extension of his will, crackling with a sound that is less noise and more the tearing of reality. The heat is instantaneous and dry, scorching your skin even from a distance. You instinctively stumble back, shielding your eyes, but you can't look away. This is the spectacle. This is the power everyone knows, the foundation of 1,000 temple friezes and epic poems. The master of Olympus, unleashing his signature force. This, Zeus bellows, his voice merging with the roar of the energy, is the lightning, forged in the heart of the storm, obedient only to my hand. It is mine. The declaration is absolute, a fact of the universe. He draws back, a pitcher winding up for the throw of all throws, and the tension in the air becomes almost solid. You can feel the cove itself shrinking, the sea flattening, the very rocks seeming to press downward in submission. This is the moment of divine proof. This is how God wins. But your eyes flick to Chelon. He hasn't moved. He stands perfectly still in the maelstrom of light and sound, his simple clothes whipped by the generated wind, his eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in acute observation. He's not watching the bolt, he's watching Zeus. He's studying the god's posture, his claim, his utter certainty. It's the same way he watched the sea turtle, not judging its speed, but understanding its nature. With a shout that could split mountains, Zeus hurls the lightning. The world dissolves into a single, vertical line of annihilation. The bolt doesn't arc. It punches through the atmosphere, a spear of pure daylight shot from a divine crossbow. The sound is beyond thunder. It's the shriek of the sky being violently parted. It streaks across the horizon, over the endless wine-dark sea, a line of fury so bright it leaves a ghostly afterimage burned into your vision. It doesn't fade gradually. It simply winks out at a point impossibly far away, where the sea meets the sky. A moment later, a low, rolling groan of displaced air and shattered sound finally reaches you, a pathetic echo of the main event. In the distance, where the bolt struck, a tiny momentary mushroom of cloud, white and angry, puffs up before being shredded by the winds. Silence returns, deeper and more profound than before. The air smells of ozone and scorched stone. Zeus lowers his arm, a faint, smug trail of smoke curling from his fingertips. He turns to Chelon, his expression one of benevolent triumph. "It lands on the Isle of Thera," he announces, as casually as a man noting where his discus landed in the gymnasium. "A distance no mortal eye can see, no mortal ship can quickly sail. Now," he gestures with an open hand toward the wooden sphere at Chelon's feet. The gesture is dripping with condescension. "Your turn, old one. Show me the might of your possession." A lesser-known, almost absurd historical tidbit, the island of Thera, modern Santorini, was indeed associated with massive, catastrophic volcanic activity. The myth might be echoing a folk memory of a tremendous, sky-splitting event, like a volcanic eruption or a meteor impact, that was later attributed to Zeus's wrath. The geography of divine punishment was often very specific and tied to real, fearsome places. Chelon doesn't speak. He simply bends down, his movements old and stiff, and picks up the wooden sphere. He weighs it in his palm, then looks not at Zeus, but at you. He gives that same barely there nod. Watch the claim. He takes a small step forward, not a running start, just a gentle shift of weight. He cocks his arm back with a modest, practiced motion, like a man about to skip a stone on a pond. There's no fanfare, no cry to the heavens, no gathering of cosmic energy. Just an old man, on a beach, preparing to throw a knobby ball of wood. He throws it. The sphere leaves his hand with a soft, underwhelming woof of air. It doesn't blaze. It doesn't scream. It travels in a low, gentle arc, spinning lazily. It flies over the sand, over the tittle-line, and plops into the shallow water of the cove with a decidedly unmajestic plop, maybe 40 paces from where he stands. It bobs there for a moment, then begins to drift listlessly with the gentle lap of the waves. The contrast is so absurd it's painful. After the cosmic artillery shot, this is the equivalent of a toddler dropping a pebble. Zeus stares at the bobbing sphere, then at Chelon. His triumphant expression flickers, shifts through confusion, and settles into a slow-burning, incredulous anger. The air, which had begun to relax, tightens again, hotter and more dangerous this time. Is this a joke? Zeus's voice is low, a rumble of gathering storm clouds. A mockery? You throw your trinket into the water at your feet, and you dare to stand after witnessing my power? Chelon finally looks at the god. His face is serene. The contest, he says, his voice clear and carrying in the new silence, was whose object would fly farther. Yours has landed on Thera. Mine has landed in the cove. He pauses, letting the obvious, ridiculous fact hang in the air. Then he delivers the line that changes everything. But you misunderstand, Lord. We were not measuring from this spot. We were measuring from ourselves. He points a bony finger at Zeus, then at his own chest. You threw your lightning from your hand. It now rests on Thera. I threw my sphere from my hand. It now rests in the water. He takes a single step toward the god, his gaze unwavering. The distance between you and your lightning is the width of the sea. The distance between me and my sphere is the width of this beach. My possession, he says with devastating simplicity, remains closer to me than yours does to you. Therefore, I have thrown it farther from myself. I have won. The cove holds its breath. You stop breathing altogether. The logic is insane. It's brilliant. It's a complete subversion of the expected contest. Zeus's face goes utterly still, a mask of marble slowly heating from within. He hadn't specified the starting point. He'd only said, whose object flies farther wins. Chelon hasn't beaten his throw. He's beaten his premise. Historians still debate the origins of such paradoxical riddles in myth, wondering if they served as early legal or philosophical exercises, testing the boundaries of agreements and definitions under absolute, unjust power. In this moment, Chelon isn't just an old man. He's a logician facing down a tyrant. For a heartbeat that feels like an eon, there is no sound but the gentle, mocking plip-plop of the wooden sphere bobbing in the shallows. Zeus's stillness is more terrifying than any rage. The god's storm-colored eyes are locked on Chelon, but they don't see an old man anymore. They see a flaw in the fabric of his own authority, a crack in the monolith, and the fury that kindles is cold and infinitely more dangerous than the hot passion of the lightning bolt. You twist words, Zeus says, each syllable dropping like a stone into a deep well. The air doesn't crackle. It congeals, growing heavy and hard to breathe. You play a beggar's trick. The contest was a might, a projective force, to cast an object a great distance. Every soul with wit understands this. Chelon doesn't flinch. He stands in that thickening air as if rooted to the bedrock beneath the sand. Every soul with wit also understands the terms they agreed to, he replies, his voice still that maddeningly calm, clear stream. You said, I will throw something of mine. You will throw something of yours. Whose object flies farther wins. You declared the lightning yours. I declared the sphere mine. The distances are measured. Mine remains close. Yours has fled far from you. By the letter of your challenge, the result is plain. He spreads his empty hands, a gesture of finality. The might was in the claim, Lord, not in the throw. And my claim held true. This is the moment where the popular, known trajectory of such myths, the mortal being smote into a grease spot, veers wildly off course. Because Zeus, king of the gods, is caught, not in a net of strength, but in a web of his own making, spun from the very declarations of ownership that form the basis of his power. To deny Chelon's interpretation is to admit that his own words were loose, his challenge flawed. To accept it is to be defeated by a piece of driftwood. The god's pride, that vast and fragile thing, is trapped on the horns of a dilemma of its own creation. A weird, lesser-known fact. In some of the oldest strata of Greek myth, the gods are bound by certain rules, especially by their own oaths sworn on the river Styx. Their power, while immense, isn't absolutely arbitrary within the framework of their own declarations. It's a chink in the divine armor, a narrative loophole that clever mortals, or titans like Prometheus, could sometimes exploit. This isn't about overpowering the gods. It's about outmaneuvering the system of the gods. Zeus's jaw tightens. You can see the muscle working. The patronizing benevolence is gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, celestial wool beneath. Acclaim, he grinds out, taking a step forward. The pebbles on the beach groan under his foot. You speak of claims. You hold up your little carved nothing and say, "This is mine." Very well. Let us examine claims. His gaze sweeps over the cove, the hut, the garden, and finally lands back on Chelin with devastating focus. The lightning is of the sky. The sky is mine. Therefore, the lightning is mine. Its distance from my person is irrelevant. It exists within my domain, as all things do. He's shifting the goalposts, reframing the contest from distance of object to breadth of domain. It's a classic move of absolute power. When you can't win by the rules, you declare that the territory itself is yours, and therefore any outcome within it is your victory by default. Historians still debate whether myths like these reflect ancient political realities, where a local chieftain or early king's authority was constantly being tested and renegotiated through just such verbal and ritualistic contests. But Chelin is ready. He'd been waiting for this. Is it? He asks, the question soft but piercing. You say the sky is your domain. You say you own it. But did you create it? Did you fashion it from nothing? Or did you win it? In a contest? Against your father? He lets the question hang. He's referencing the Titanomachy, the great war where Zeus and his siblings wrested control of the cosmos from Kronos. It's the foundational story of his reign. You claimed it, through might, just as you claimed the lightning today. But a thing claimed through force can be lost through force, or, he adds, with a tiny, significant pause, through a better claim. He gestures to the wooden sphere, still drifting innocently. I did not take this by force. I found it discarded by the sea. I shaped it with my own time, my own effort. Its form came from my mind, through my hands. No one contests it. Its domain is its own shape, and it is within my reach. He takes a step toward the water, and with a slow, deliberate motion, bends down and picks the sphere out of the sea. He holds it up, water dripping from it. You see? I can retrieve it. It answers to me. Can you retrieve your lightning from Thera? Can you call it back to your hand, now that it has struck? Or is it spent, dispersed, gone from you until you summon the effort to create another? The insult is breathtaking. He's comparing the king of the gods to a common laborer, suggesting that his divine weapon is a consumable, disposable tool, while the old man's silly ball is a permanent, retrievable possession. He's turning the concept of ownership inside out from vast, abstract, tyrannical domain to small, concrete, personal mastery. Zeus's eyes blaze. The sky above, which had been clearing, suddenly boils with black, bruise-colored clouds. The first cold drops of rain begin to fall, hard and sharp as pebbles. You dare. The god's voice is the grinding of continental plates. He is beyond reason now, cornered by logic and responding with the only thing he has left, pure, unadulterated power. The lesson is about to be delivered, not in words, but in transformation. The victory of wit is real, but in the world of the gods, such victories are often followed by the most cruel and poetic of punishments. Chelin has outsmarted Zeus, and now he will pay the price for making the king of heaven look like a fool in front of the silent stones and the watching sea. The rain isn't water. It's 1,000 cold, stinging needles. The sky isn't just stormy. It's a cauldron of divine indignation, churning with suppressed thunder. Zeus stands there, swollen with a power that has no outlet in logic. So it seeks one in transformation. The smugness, the condescension, even the cold anger. It all melts away into something far more terrifying, a pure creative wrath. He isn't going to incinerate Chelon. That would be an admission of defeat, of resorting to brute force after losing the war of words. No, the punishment must fit the crime. It must be a lesson etched into flesh and bone for all eternity. You speak of possession. Zeus's voice rolls, deeper than the thunder now growling in the clouds. Of things held close, of reach. He takes a step forward, and the ground doesn't shake. It seems to flinch away from him. You value your slow, creeping certainty, your self-contained world. You clutch your wooden world as if it were a kingdom. A cruel, brilliant light ignites in his eyes. It's the light of a terrible idea. Very well. You wish for your possession to be close. You wish for your domain to be your own shape. I shall grant you a new definition of close, a new understanding of your shape. Chelon doesn't back away. He holds the dripping sphere in one hand, his other hanging loose at his side. He looks up at the god, and for the first time, you see not calculation, but a profound, weary acceptance. He knew this was the only possible end. To win the game was to provoke the player to flip the board. He closes his eyes, not in fear, but as if turning his focus inward one last time. Zeus raises a hand, not in a throwing motion, but with fingers spread, as if sculpting the air itself. The power he summons now is different from the lightning. It's not explosive, it's insidious. It's a pressure that doesn't crush but seeps. It's the weight of a mountain distilled into a whisper. A weird, lesser-known fact. In myth, divine metamorphosis is rarely instantaneous magic. It's often described as a slow, dreadful molding, as if the god is reworking clay on a cosmic wheel, the victim horrifically aware throughout the process. You feel it before you see it. The air around Chelon thickens, becomes viscous. It starts at his feet. The simple leather sandals seem to melt, not in a liquid, but into a dark, scaly texture. The toes fuse together, blunt and flattening. The change crawls up his legs with a sound like wet stone grinding against itself. His posture begins to curve forward, pulled by an invisible, immense weight settling onto his spine. It's not a hunch. It's an architectural restructuring. Chelon lets out a sound. Not a scream, but a sharp, choked gasp of air forced from changing lungs. His arms, still holding the sphere, shorten. His fingers stiffen, the clever, carving joints fusing, the skin hardening into a rough, keratinous plate. The sphere falls from his grasp, thudding onto the sand, now at the end of a limb that is no longer an arm, but a clumsy, paddle-like flipper. It is not enough to be slow. Zeus intones, his voice the only clear thing in the roaring storm. You must be burdened. You wish to carry your house. Now you shall. Not a hut of reeds, but a vault of your own bone. The change accelerates, a horrific ripple passing over Chelon's torso. His simple tunic is absorbed, vanished, as his back swells upward in a great, domed arch vertebrae expand, fuse, ribs flatten and broaden, knitting together into a single, massive, bony plate, a carapace. It pushes him further toward the earth. His neck thickens, pulls back, his head, still bearing that face of weary intelligence for one more agonizing second, sinks between the rising shoulders. The sphere lies in the sand, forgotten. The ultimate irony, his true possession, his mind and his claim, is being taken from him, while the symbol of it is left behind, inert. Historians and philologists still fiercely debate the meaning of metamorphosis myths. Were they ideological tales to explain animal features, psychological allegories for trauma, or literal expressions of the ancient belief that the boundaries between human, animal, and divine were fluid and could be transgressed, with horrific consequences? In this moment, it feels like all three: a punishment, a prison, and a perverse fulfillment of his own philosophy. The process completes with a final, sickening crack of settling structure. Where Chelon stood, there now kneels, no, crouches, a large, ancient-looking tortoise. Its shell is dark and patterned like weathered wood and stone. Its eyes, small and deep-set, are those same clear gray, but clouded now with animal confusion. It moves one heavy, clumsy front leg, dragging itself an inch forward in the sand with a painful, grating scrape. It tries to tuck its head fully into its shell, but the motion is slow, impeded by the very form meant to be its shelter. Zeus lowers his hand. The storm's fury abates to a cold drizzle. The creative wrath is spent, replaced by a grim satisfaction. He looks at the tortoise, then at the wooden sphere. "There," he says, his voice returning to its normal, terrifying register. "Now your possession is inseparable from you. Your domain is your shell. Your reach is the length of your neck. Your speed is the patience you so loved. Cherish your victory, Chelon. You have become your argument." He flicks a glance at you, a look that freezes the blood in your veins, a warning etched in ice, and then, without another word, he is simply gone. The cove is silent again, save for the drip of rain from the reeds and the shallow, rasping breath of the tortoise. The sphere lies half buried in wet sand. The hut stands empty. The victory was real. The punishment is eternal. And you are left alone on the beach, bearing witness to the most dangerous truth of all. In a contest with absolute power, even when you win, you lose. You stand there, frozen, the cold rain mixing with the salt spray on your skin. The transformation wasn't blinding or explosive. It was intimate and grotesque, like watching a tree petrify in fast motion. The silence left in Zeus's wake is total, a vacuum that sucks all sound and warmth from the world. The tortoise, Chelon, moves again. One heavy, deliberate drag of its front flipper, carving a small trough in the wet sand. It doesn't look at you. Its gray eyes, those windows to a mind that just outmaneuvered a god, are now fixed on some middle distance, seeing nothing, or perhaps seeing everything through a new, horrifyingly simple lens. It tries to move toward the water, but the effort is Herculean. The shell, that new, permanent house, is an anchor. It is the ultimate burden disguised as protection. You stumble forward, your legs numb. You pick up the wooden sphere from the sand. It's cool and smooth in your hand, the carving marks still visible under your thumb. It feels like a tombstone. This is the artifact of the victory, the proof, and it's utterly meaningless. You look from the sphere to the tortoise, and the lesson sinks in with the weight of a mountain. Cleverness is no shield. Insight is no armor. In fact, they are provocations. The well-known, brutal truth of Greek myth is that the gods enforce a hierarchy, and intelligence in mortals is tolerated only when it serves them, like Odysseus's cunning, which Athena sponsors, or when it is directed against other mortals. Turn it upward, toward the heavens themselves, and it becomes the ultimate transgression. The tortoise reaches the water's edge. A tiny wave washes over its front flippers, and it stops, as if confused by the sensation. It doesn't retreat. It just rests there, half in, half out of the sea, a creature caught between worlds. You realize this is his new existence. No longer the wise observer in the sheltered cove, but a slow, vulnerable thing at the mercy of the tides, the predators, the blistering sun. Zeus didn't just transform him. He exiled him into a life of perpetual vulnerability, all while trapped in a fortress of his own body. It's a punishment of poetic, cruel genius. A weird, lesser-known fact. The tortoise holds an ambiguous place in Greek mythology. It's associated with Hermes, who supposedly invented the lyre from a tortoise shell, symbolizing clever craft, but also with slowness, obscurity, and the chthonic, the underworldly, earthy forces that oppose the celestial Olympians. By making Chelon a tortoise, Zeus didn't just demean him. He bound him to the earth, to silence, and to a form that symbolized the very obscurity he once chose, now made into a prison. Historians still debate whether animal transformations were seen as a descent down the great chain of being, a loss of rational soul, or simply as a vivid metaphor for social ostracization and loss of voice. You sink to your knees in the sand, the sphere held tight. The adrenaline drains away, leaving a hollow, echoing fear. What now? The cove is cursed. The attention of Olympus has been here, and its mark is left in the form of a slow-moving lesson. You can't stay, but the thought of returning to the world of frantic sacrifices and paranoid whispers feels even more suffocating. You had a glimpse of a different way to be, and you watched it be crushed not by argument, but by fiat. The tortoise moves its head slightly, the gray eye rotating toward you. There's no recognition there. Not as you'd understand it. No pleading, no regret, just a profound animal stillness. But in that stillness, you think you see an echo of the old calm. The patience isn't gone, it's been fossilized, forced into its most extreme, literal form. Chelon wanted to carry his house. Now he does. He valued what was within his reach. Now his reach is measured in inches. You look at the sphere in your hand, then at the dark clay bowl, still sitting farther up the beach, the one he called a container. A reminder. An idea strikes you, fragile and desperate. You won't leave it. You can't undo what was done, but you can refuse to let the story end as Zeus intended, with a forgotten, crawling lesson in the sand. You get up, your clothes soaked and heavy. You walk to the bowl, pick it up, and bring it to the water's edge. You place the wooden sphere carefully inside it. Then, with a tenderness that feels both ridiculous and necessary, you place the bowl, with its content, directly in front of the tortoise's head, half submerged in the shallow water. The creature doesn't react at first. Then, with infinite slowness, it extends its neck a fraction further. Its head dips. It doesn't nudge the sphere. It simply rests its chin on the rim of the clay bowl, as if leaning on a windowsill. The sphere, in its container, bobs slightly with the movement of the water. It's still within reach. The claim, though mute, is physically preserved. A tiny, stubborn monument to the victory that cost everything. You don't know if it means anything, but it's the only thing you can do. You stand there, guardian of a ruined peace, as the drizzle finally stops and a thin, watery sunlight breaks through the clouds, illuminating the scene. The tortoise, the bowl, the sphere, and you. The story isn't over. It's just changed shape, become slower, heavier, and destined to be carried in silence. You realize you're now the only one who knows the whole truth. Not just the popular myth of divine punishment, but the quiet, devastating story of the victory that preceded it. And with that knowledge comes a new, heavy responsibility, and a loneliness as deep as the sea stretching out before you. The sun climbs, baking the wet sand into a warm, salty crust. You sit there for what feels like hours, watching the tortoise. It doesn't move from its spot by the bowl. It breathes, slow and steady, the rhythm of a creature for whom time has lost all urgency. You realize the true depth of Zeus's punishment. It wasn't just the shell. It was the erasure of context. Anyone stumbling upon this beach would see just a tortoise, a common, unremarkable animal. The brilliant, subversive mind that challenged the king of the gods is now invisible, locked behind a wall of instinct and simplified need. The story of Chelon, the man who out-argued Zeus, is already beginning to dissolve, like a message written in seawater on hot stone. Unless someone remembers, unless someone tells it. This is how myths die, not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping silence. The popular, victorious narratives, the Hercules tales, the glory of Achilles, they get sung by bards, carved into temples. They become the official history. But the quiet, ambiguous stories, the ones where the little guy wins on a technicality only to be crushed by the system anyway, those get whispered, then forgotten or deliberately obscured. They're inconvenient. They suggest that the universe isn't just or orderly, but capricious and vindictive, and that cleverness is a liability. No ruling power, divine or mortal, particularly likes that lesson being broadcast. A weird, lesser-known fact. Many of the Greek myths we have today come to us through a filter of later writers. Ovid, a Roman poet writing during the reign of Augustus, is a prime source. Ovid loved transformation stories, but he often infused them with a sense of irony, pity, and political subtext, reflecting his own disillusionment with the authoritarian power of the Roman emperors. It's entirely possible stories like Chellen's existed in the oral tradition, but were softened, or the ending changed, to make them more palatable, to remove the uncomfortable sting of a victory that leads only to a worse defeat. Historians still debate how much of the darkness in myths is original, and how much was edited out by generations of storytellers who needed their audiences to sleep at night, not question the nature of power. You finally force yourself to stand. Your joints are stiff. You look at the hut, the neat garden. It's now a monument to a ghost. You can't stay here. This place is marked. But you also can't leave empty-handed. You walk to the workbench. The carving tools are still there, laid out with Chellen's signature neatness. Next to them is a small, unfinished piece, a little carving of a turtle, barely roughed out. Your throat tightens. You pick it up along with a single, well-worn carving knife. These are your relics, not gold or magic weapons, but tools of patience and observation. You return to the water's edge one last time. The tortoise hasn't moved. The sphere still rests in its bowl. You kneel down, your voice a hoarse whisper in the vast, empty air. I'll remember, you say, though you know the creature cannot understand the words. Maybe you say it for yourself. The claim mattered. The victory was real. As if in response, a larger wave rolls in, gentle but insistent. It lifts the clay bowl, floats it for a moment, and then pulls it back, out of the tortoise's immediate reach. The sphere rolls inside the bowl, a quiet, hollow sound. The tortoise watches it go, its head turning with ancient slowness. It makes no move to follow. It can't. The bowl drifts a few feet away, caught in a gentle eddy. And in that simple, natural event, you see the final, brutal lesson. Even the memorial you try to create is subject to forces beyond your control. The sea, like the sky, is another god's domain. Nothing stays. Nothing is truly secure. You slip the small turtle carving and the knife into a fold of your garment. You take a final, long look at the cove, imprinting it on your memory. The light on the water, the green of the garden, the dark shape of the tortoise against the pale sand, and the small, bobbing bowl drifting slowly toward the open sea. Then you turn and walk away, not up the beach the way you came, but inland toward the rocky hills that fringe the coast. You don't have a destination. You just know you need to put distance between yourself and the scene of the crime, the scene of the victory, the scene of the transformation. You are now a carrier of a dangerous, fading truth, and you have no idea what to do with it, except to carry it as carefully and as secretly as the tortoise carries its shell. The weight is already settling onto your own shoulders, a different kind of burden, the burden of memory in a world that prefers to forget. The landscape changes as you climb. The soft, salty air of the cove gives way to the dry, dusty scent of time and sun-baked rock. Your sandals scuff against stone, and each step feels heavier, not from fatigue, but from the invisible weight you now carry. The carving in your fold presses against your skin, a small, hard kernel of a story that feels too large for the world. You find a narrow goat path leading to a high bluff overlooking the sea. From here, the cove is just a small, anonymous curve in the coastline. You can't see the tortoise. You can't see the hut. It's all reduced to geography, stripped of its recent, terrible history. This is how the gods see the world, you realize from a great indifferent height. Individual dramas are just smudges on the landscape, erased by distance and time. You sit on a warm rock, the endless blue of the Aegean stretching before you. The adrenaline has long since faded, leaving a hollow, ringing quiet in its place. You think about Chelin's logic, his flawless, fatal trap. He won. By any reasonable measure of the agreed terms, he won. And his prize was to become a slow-moving lesson for anyone who might get similar ideas. It strikes you that this might be the most authentic, unvarnished Greek myth of all. Not a triumph of good over evil or a tragedy of hubris, but a stark demonstration of power's ultimate veto. It doesn't matter how right you are. If the one you're right against holds the lightning, you lose. The well-known heroic myths are the exceptions, the propaganda. This, the quiet, intellectual victory met with creative cruelty, feels like the rule they don't want sung in the great halls. A weird, lesser-known fact. There's a concept in some branches of classical studies called the suppressed myth. These are story fragments, contradictory versions, or eerie silences in the record that hint at narratives which were actively marginalized because they challenged social or religious orthodoxy. The story of a mortal legally outmaneuvering Zeus and being transformed not for hubris, but for making the god look foolish would be a prime candidate for suppression. It undermines the very foundation of pious fear. Historians still debate how intentionally the priestly and poetic traditions sanitized the mythic corpus, but the evidence suggests that the versions we have are often the ones that serve to reinforce the status quo. You take out the half-finished turtle carving. In the bright sunlight, you can see the careful marks of the knife, the intention in the rough shape. It was going to be a representation of patience, of self-containment. Now it's a funeral offering for a living man. You run your thumb over it, and an idea, fragile and dangerous, begins to form. You can't shout this story from the rooftops. That would be suicide. Zeus's warning glance was clear. Some truths are not for dissemination, but you could carve it. Not in words, but in symbol. You can make more of these. Small, unassuming turtles. And if anyone asked, you could tell a simpler, safer story. It's for patience, you'd say. For carrying your home with you. You would bury the real story, the victory, the logic, the transformation, deep within the symbol, like a seed in hard soil. It would be a story told in silence, through an object. A story for those who might look at a turtle and see not just slowness, but a hidden, formidable intelligence that chose its shape, even if that choice was later turned against it. It feels like a pitiful plan, but it's all you have. It's the turtle's strategy. Move slowly, carry your truth with you, and hope it goes beneath the notice of the curious child in the sky. You put the carving away and pull out the knife. You find a piece of dry, soft wood from a fallen shrub. You don't start carving a turtle. Instead, you begin to carve a sphere. A simple, rough sphere. Because the story starts with the claim, not the punishment. As your knife bites into the wood, the rhythmic shush-shush sound echoes, faintly, the sound of Chelin at his workbench. You are, in a way, continuing his work. Not the work of confrontation, but the work of preservation through subtle, patient craft. The sun moves across the sky. The sea below changes from brilliant blue to a deeper, metallic hue. You're no longer just a witness. You become a scribe. An archivist of a lost argument. And with that role comes a dull, constant anxiety, the fear that in carving even this simple shape, you're drawing attention, that the very act of remembering is a form of defiance. But you keep carving because the alternative, letting the story vanish completely, letting Zeus have not only the victory, but the narrative, feels like a deeper betrayal. The sphere in your hands begins to take shape, imperfect and humble. It is yours. You shaped it. And for now, that is the only claim that feels safe to make. Days blur into a rhythm dictated by sunlight, hunger, and the slow progress of your carving. You find a secluded overhang farther along the coast. Not as perfect as Chelin's Cove, but hidden. You forage for figs and olives, catch fish from tidal pools with a patience you didn't know you possessed. It's a meager, watchful existence. Every distant rumble of thunder, every odd stillness in the air, makes your heart clench. You are waiting for the other sandal to drop, for Zeus to remember the witness and decide to tidy up that loose end. But the punishment, it seems, was considered complete. The lesson was in the transformation, not in your annihilation. You were part of the audience, and to strike you down would be an admission that the lesson wasn't clear enough on its own. So you were spared, but you live with the whispering certainty of being spared for now. Your collection of carvings grows. Spheres, small shallow bowls, and turtles. Always turtles. You don't try to make them beautiful or lifelike. You make them sturdy, heavy, their heads slightly withdrawn as if in thought, not fear. They're solid, weighty little things. You line them up on a flat rock under your overhang. They look like a strange, silent council. You speak to them sometimes in a low voice, rehearsing the story. He asked about ownership. You whisper to a particularly lumpy turtle. He asked what it means to truly possess something. And he proved that Zeus's possession was distant, abstract, while his was close and real. The turtles say nothing back, which is the point. They hold the story in their mute, wooden forms. This is how mythology survives on the ground level. You realize, not in epic recitations, but in household objects, in charms, in the patterns on pots. A weird, lesser-known fact. Archaeologists often find masses of small, crudely made terracotta figurines, animals, humans, shapes, at ancient Greek sites. They're frequently interpreted as votive offerings, but their true personal significance is lost. Some might have been exactly this: physical tokens of a personal story, a private understanding of the divine that didn't match the official temple version. A peasant might have kept a small carved weasel, not because it represented a major god, but because of a local tale where a weasel outwitted a fox, a story that gave them a private sense of hope or identity. Historians still debate the vast gap between the high mythology of poets and the low, personal religious practices of everyday people. Your growing row of turtles feels like a bridge across that gap. They're your personal, physical votives to Chelin, not to a god, but to a principle, to the idea that a correct argument has value, even if the price for making it is unthinkably high. One afternoon, while searching for fresh water, you come across a small, dusty shrine at a crossroads inland. It's a simple pile of stones with a faded, painted plaque dedicated to Hermes, god of travelers, thieves, and cleverness. You stop, your hand going to the carving in your fold. Hermes, the trickster, the one who, as an infant, stole Apollo's cattle and then charmed his way out of punishment. The one who invented the lyre from a tortoise shell. The connection hits you like a physical jolt. The tortoise shell. Was that story, too, a sanitized remnant of something darker? A playful god crafting an instrument from a creature, rather than a king of gods transforming a man into the creature as punishment for cleverness? The popular myth makes it a whimsical act of invention. Your story knows the cost of the raw material. You leave one of your small wooden turtles at the base of Hermes' shrine. It's not an offering in the traditional sense. It's a message left for the one god who might appreciate the nuances of a clever, losing victory. You say no prayer. You just place it there and walk away quickly, your skin prickling. You half expect a sign, a chuckle on the wind, but there is only the dust and the buzzing of flies. The story is now outside of you. It exists in wood, placed at a crossroads. It's a seed. You have no idea if it will rot, be found, or be understood. But the act of placing it there feels like the next step in Chelin's logic. If you cannot speak the truth, you can position it where it might be discovered by the right mind at the right time. You are no longer just an archivist. You have become a sower of silent, wooden seeds. And with that, the weight you carry changes again. It's no longer just a burden of memory, but the quiet, nervous burden of potential. The seasons turn. The fierce summer sun softens into the golden light of autumn. You've become a part of the landscape, a quiet figure moving between the bluffs and the shore. Your carvings are your only conversation. You've started to combine the forms. A small sphere nestled in the bowl-like curve of a turtle's back, or a turtle carved with one flipper resting on a ball. The story is condensing, becoming glyph-like. You don't need to rehearse the words anymore. Your hands know the shape of the argument. In the quiet, your mind begins to wander beyond the immediate shock and fear to the deeper implications of what you witnessed. You think about victory. In the popular tales, victory is clear-cut. The monster slain, the city saved, the prize won. Hercules gets the apples. Theseus escapes the labyrinth. Their wins are physical, territorial, endorsed by the gods or fate. Chelen's victory was of a different kind, purely intellectual, semantic, and it resulted in his utter undoing. So, was it even a victory at all? Or was it the ultimate defeat disguised as a momentary checkmate? You lie under your overhang at night, watching the stars, those distant, untouchable points of light that Zeus also claims, and you grapple with this. The conclusion you keep circling back to is uncomfortable. In a system of absolute power, the only safe victory is one the powerful grant you. Any victory you take for yourself, especially one that exposes a flaw in their logic or authority, is an act of rebellion that demands a response. Chelen didn't just win a contest. He exposed the arbitrary nature of divine rules. And for that, he had to be unmade. A weird, little-known fact. The ancient Greek concept of nemesis wasn't just about retribution for hubris. It could represent a kind of cosmic rebalancing, an automatic correction for any state of affairs that tipped too far out of equilibrium, including unexpected mortal success that disturbed the divine-mortal hierarchy. By this logic, Chelen's brilliant play didn't just anger Zeus. It upset the natural order, and his transformation was the universe's, via Zeus, way of snapping the balance back. Historians still debate how consciously the Greeks thought about these concepts, but the stories themselves are machines for exploring these uneasy dynamics. One morning, you go down to a different, broader beach to fish. You see a merchant ship anchored in the bay, and small boats ferrying amphorae to shore. Your heart hammers, contact with the outside world. For a moment, you consider hiding, but curiosity and a loneliness deeper than you'd admitted pulls you closer. You watch the sailors, hear their shouts, the mundane complaints about the heat and the price of wine in the next port. It's a world away from silent coves and metaphysical punishments. You approach a group resting in the shade of a beached boat. You listen. They talk of storms survived, bad omens, good prices. Then one, a grizzled man mending a net, says, "Heard a strange one from up the coast." Fisherman swears he saw a giant tortoise, big as a shield, sunning itself on a lonely beach. Odd thing, he said. Didn't flee. Just looked at him with these old, knowing eyes. Had a funny little clay bowl floating next to it with a wooden ball inside. Fisherman left it be. Said it felt unlucky to disturb. The air leaves your lungs. You stare at your hands, calloused from carving. The story is out. It has already begun to mutate. The tortoise is now giant. The knowing eyes are a detail added by a spooked fisherman. The bowl and sphere are still there, a surreal detail anchoring the tale to truth. But it's becoming a sailor's yarn, a curiosity. The core of it, the contest, the logic, the transformation as punishment, is missing. It's being sanded down into something strange but harmless, a piece of local oddity. This is how it happens, you think. This is how the sharp, dangerous truth becomes a smooth, safe myth. The victory is erased first, leaving only the strange aftermath. You don't correct them. You don't tell your story. You just nod as if it's an interesting tale. To speak would be to carve your name on a warrant. But inside, a small, defiant flame flickers. The tortoise is seen. The bowl and sphere are noted. The memory of Chelen, in however distorted a form, is circulating. It's not the story he deserved, but it's a footprint, and a footprint means he was here. He existed. He argued. And against all odds, in the most twisted way possible, he's still there on that beach, a slow, living monument to his own point. He is, literally, inseparable from his possession. Zeus's punishment guaranteed that Chelon would never be separated from the physical fact of his argument. In his cruelty, the god might have ensured the man's point would endure in stone and flesh, longer than any temple built in fear. The irony is so vast, it takes your breath away. You finish your fishing quietly, and as you walk back to your hideaway, you realize you're not just carrying a story anymore. You're watching it be born into the world in real time and learning the first law of its existence. To survive, it must change. The truth must wear disguise. Winter comes, a damp, chilly season that drives you further into your shelter. You carve by the dim light of a small, sheltered fire, the figures piling up, turtles, spheres, bowls. They become more than a record. They're a meditation. Each stroke of a knife is a question. What does it mean to own your life when a god can reshape it on a whim? What is the value of a victory that costs you everything? The carvings don't answer, but holding their solid, finished forms gives a strange comfort. They are finite, complete, unlike the messy, unresolved reality they represent. You think of your own life before the cove. The anxiety, the transactional prayers, the desperate hope to be overlooked. You realize Chelon offered a third path between obsequious worship and defiant hubris, mindful observation. He didn't rebel against the gods' existence. He simply studied their nature and built his life in the cracks of their attention. His error was being too good at it. So good he drew the attention he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. The lesson for you, then, isn't to hide in terror or to seek glorious confrontation. It's to learn to see clearly, to understand the rules of the game so deeply you can move within them without needing to win in a way that forces the hand of power. It's the art of the quiet, sustainable victory, the kind that doesn't get you turned into a cautionary tale. You make a new carving, a turtle, but this one's head is not withdrawn. It's lifted, looking forward. Its shell is not a burden, but simply part of its shape. You don't give it a sphere or a bowl. This one is just moving. It's your interpretation, your hope. It's Chelon's spirit, divorced from his punishment, just continuing on its slow, steady path. A weird, lesser-known fact. The philosophical school of Stoicism, which would arise centuries later, would champion concepts like focusing only on what is within your control and accepting with equanimity what is not. They used the metaphor of a dog tied to a cart. It can either trot along willingly or be dragged. Chelon, in his original human form, was a pre-Socratic Stoic in practice, if not in name. He controlled his reactions, his desires, his claims. His only mistake was that his cart was driven by a particularly vindictive driver who noticed the dog wasn't straining at the rope. Historians still debate the folk origins of such philosophical ideas, wondering how much they grew from the soil of everyday survival under capricious rulers and unpredictable nature. Stories like this won their unacknowledged seeds. One bright, cold morning, you decide to return. Not to stay, but to look. The need to see is a physical ache. You make your way cautiously along the now familiar coast, your senses sharpened for any sign of the divine. When you finally peek over the ridge down into the cove, you stop. It's different. The hut is partially collapsed, winter storms having taken their toll. The garden is wild, overgrown. And on the beach, you see it. The tortoise. It's farther along the shore, nestled in a sunny spot between two rocks. And there, bobbing gently in a tiny, protected inlet formed by those same rocks, is the clay bowl. The wooden sphere is still inside. The sea, in its infinite, mindless patience, has not taken it. It has given it a new, secure birth. The tortoise and its symbol are still together, side by side, in a new arrangement. They have weathered a season. The sight unknots a tension in your chest you didn't know you were carrying. He endures. The story endures. It's not a triumph, but it's a persistence. It's a slow, quiet, and yet you don't go down. You're not part of that tableau anymore. You are its witness, its chronicler, and now, perhaps, its student. You have your own path to walk, your own slow, patient carving to do upon your life. You take the new carving, the turtle with its head up, from your pouch. You find a crevice in the rock face overlooking the cove, a dry, sheltered spot. You place the carving inside. It's not an offering to a god. It's a marker for you, a reminder that observation is a form of wisdom and endurance is a form of victory. Then you turn and walk away, not with the grief and fear of your first departure, but with a resolved, heavy calm. The story is no longer a weight you carry alone. It's in the carvings, it's in the sailor's yarn, it's in the tortoise on the beach, and it's in you, a living thread in its long, slow unraveling. You are learning to carry your shell, not as a punishment, but as a choice. Time, you learn, is the great softener, not a healer. The sharp edges of what you saw never truly blur, but a softener. The initial terror, the vibrating shock of the divine, settles into a low, permanent hum in the background of your being, like the distant roar of a sea you can't see. You move on in the way that people do. You find work in a small village as a woodcarver, making useful things, bowls, tool handles, toys. Your hands, once quick to shake, grow steadier again, though they now bear the stiffness of age and years of craft. You think of Chellan often, not with piercing grief, but with a profound, quiet solidarity. You understand him better now. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just being consistent. He lived by a code of mindful possession and clear-eyed observation, and when challenged, he applied that code. His brilliance was his consistency. His tragedy was that the universe, in the form of Zeus, is inconsistent. It prizes power over principle. But in a final, ironic twist, his consistency was so perfect it forced an inconsistency in the god, a moment of logical cornering that required an irrational, creative overreaction to solve. In making Chellan a tortoise, Zeus forever bound the symbol of slowness and patience to the story of a brilliant mind. He made the tortoise wise. One evening, as you sit by your own small fire, carving the last of a batch of wooden spoons, a traveler comes to your door. A young man, dusty from the road, with curious eyes. He's heard there's an old carver in the village who makes unusual little turtles. He's collecting stories, he says. Ad local mis. He buys a turtle from you, a simple one. As he turns in his hands, he says, I heard a story once, from a sailor gone old, about a tortoise on a beach that was once a man who argued with a god. They say he won the argument, but lost his shape. Do you know it? Your knife stills. The fire pops. You look at the young man, seeing in him your own younger self, curious, seeking patterns in the chaos. You could tell him everything. Unburden yourself at last. Pass the true story on to a collector of tales. But you look at the turtle in his hand, and you think of the giant tortoise of the sailor's yarn, and you think of the silent, enduring creature on the beach, and you think of the seeds you've planted in wood and at crossroads. The true story is a weapon. It is also a burden, and it is safest where it is distributed, disguised, living in fragments. You smile, a small, weathered smile. I've heard many sailors' tales. You say, your voice rough with age and smoke. They grow in the telling. But the turtle? You point to the carving in his palm. It's a good reminder to go slow, to carry what's truly yours, and to be careful what contests you enter, even if you're sure of the rules. You meet his eyes, hoping he catches the shadow of the warning within the platitude. Some victories change you in ways you can't take back. He nods, seeming both satisfied and slightly disappointed. He thanks you and leaves, the turtle tucked in his pack, another carrier of the muted symbol. You watch him go. The full truth stays with you, as it always has. It is your possession, your sphere of understanding. It is close to you. It shelters you, and it is yours alone to carry until the end of your days. You finish your spoon and set it aside. The fire is warm. The night is still. You feel the familiar, heavy calm settle around you, not as an absence of feeling, but as its own kind of presence. The story of Chelin, the turtle who outsmarted Zeus, is over. But its echoes are everywhere, in the slow turn of the seasons, in the patient craft of your hands, in the quiet defiance of simply enduring, and in the deep, unspoken understanding that the most profound victories are often the ones no one else can see, the ones that don't change the world, but simply allow you to live in it, clear-eyed and unbroken. You close your eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire, a sound both ephemeral and eternal, and you let the memory of the sun-warmed cove and the silent understanding that passed between a man and a tortoise fill you one last time before sleep. And so, we too must leave that shoreline, leave the old storyteller's woodshop smelling of resin, and return to our own rooms and our own rest. You're lying here now, perhaps in a warm bed, far removed from angry gods and sun-baked Aegean beaches. But the lesson of Chelin, however worn smooth by time and retelling, settles quietly, like gold dust sinking to the bottom of a cup. It reminds us that in a world full of loud proclamations and races for more recognition, more possessions, more proof of our worth, there's a profound strength in knowing what is truly yours. Not what you loudly claim, but what you can quietly hold. Not what shines for others, but what sustains you in the dark. It's the argument you make to yourself, the principle you live by when no one is watching, the slow, patient craft you apply to your days. These are the things that remain close. These are the spheres you can always retrieve from the water. The sky may belong to giants. The lightning will always be theirs to throw. But your mind, your pace, your quiet understanding, that is your shell. It may feel like a burden at times, heavy and confining, but it is also your shelter. It is the shape you carry, and within it, you're free to think, to observe, to understand the rules of the game without needing to win in a way that draws the destructive gaze of power. So let your breathing deepen now. Let the images of the cove, the tortoise, the bobbing wooden sphere, all grow softer, blending into the dim light of your room. There are no contests to win here, no claims to stake, only the gentle, undeniable fact of your own presence. You are here. You are contained. You are carrying all that you need. The story is over, but its peace remains, offered not as a solution, but as a companion to your own quiet endurance. Let the hum of the fan, the weight of the blanket, the distant sound of the world outside, all become that lapping wave on the shore of your consciousness. There is nothing more to figure out tonight. No arguments to perfect, just the slow, steady rhythm of a creature that knows how to be still, how to carry its home, and how to rest deeply and securely within its own unbreakable bounds. End of script. Sweet dreams.